Matt had driven this road 100 times before. It was the kind of quiet country road where nothing ever happened. Trees lined both sides, and fields stretched far into the distance. The sun was low in the sky, casting a soft orange glow over everything. He was just 20 minutes from home, thinking about what he'd make for dinner. Then he saw the SUV. It was parked on the side of the road, a little tilted as if the driver had pulled over in a hurry. Smoke or steam was coming from under the hood, and someone was standing next to it, waving slowly at the passing cars. But there weren't many cars on this road, just Matt. He hesitated for a moment. He had a rule about not stopping for strangers, but something about the way the woman waved didn't seem dangerous. She didn't look like she was trying to get attention. She looked like she needed real help. So he slowed down and pulled over behind the SUV. Matt stepped out of his truck and walked toward her. "Car trouble?" he asked. The woman gave a small nod. She looked calm, but a little tired. She was dressed neatly, like she had come from work. "It just stopped," she said. "I don't know what happened. It started making a noise and then just quit." "Mind if I take a look?" Matt asked. She stepped aside. "Please. I called someone, but they're not here yet." Matt popped the hood and peered inside. The engine was still warm. Steam hissed softly as it rose into the cool air. He wasn't a full-time mechanic anymore, but he still knew his way around an engine. He started checking the basics. The battery looked fine. There didn't seem to be a leak, but the belts were old. While he worked, the woman stood a few feet away, holding her phone. She looked at the screen, tapped something, then glanced around. Her movements were careful, almost too careful. "Been out here long?" Matt asked without looking up. "Just 10 minutes," she replied. "You're the first one to stop." Matt gave a short laugh. Not many people come this way anymore. He reached for the flashlight in the back seat of her car, where the door was open. Her bag had tipped over onto the seat. He wasn't trying to snoop, but something caught his eye. A small card with a photo and official-looking stamp sat half out of the bag. It wasn't just a regular ID. It looked like something from the government. He only saw a flash of it, but it said something like Central Intelligence. He blinked and stepped back. Before he could think, he heard a distant sound, low and steady, like a heavy engine. He looked up at the sky. Something was coming, and it wasn't a car. Matt stood frozen for a moment, trying to shake the strange feeling that had settled in his stomach. The distant noise was growing louder, its rumble unmistakable. It wasn't a car engine. It wasn't even a plane. The sound was much deeper, much more powerful. Matt instinctively glanced around, searching for the source. The woman, Claire, didn't seem to notice. She was still standing by the side of her car, focused on her phone. Her face remained calm, though Matt couldn't help but notice a flicker of something in her eyes. Was it worry? Or maybe just anticipation? The noise grew closer, louder now, the sound of something massive coming through the sky. It was coming from behind the trees, the thick forest that lined both sides of the road. Matt turned his head sharply, watching the trees shake as the sound got closer. It was a helicopter. His heart skipped a beat. Not just any helicopter. This one sounded much larger than the usual news or tourist helicopters that passed over occasionally. It was something heavier, something military. His instincts told him something was off. "What is that?" Matt asked, his voice barely rising above the rumble. Claire didn't flinch. She didn't even look at him. She simply nodded her head toward the sky. "It's them," she said, almost as if she'd been expecting it. Before Matt could ask another question, the helicopter appeared over the trees, its massive blades slicing through the air. It was a Black Hawk, a military helicopter with sleek black metal and sharp angles. It came in fast, descending rapidly toward the open field next to the road. Matt took a step back instinctively, feeling the rush of air as the helicopter's descent kicked up dust and debris. He shielded his eyes, squinting against the wind. Claire remained calm, almost too calm, as if she'd seen this before. Her eyes remained fixed on the approaching helicopter. The moment it landed, a cloud of dust swirled around them, and the noise was deafening. Matt felt the ground shake beneath his feet. The Black Hawk's engines roared before cutting off, leaving a strange silence in their wake. Two men jumped out of the helicopter almost immediately. They were dressed in tactical gear, their movements sharp and purposeful. One of them, a tall man with a dark beard, approached Claire, handing her a small tablet. The other man stayed a few feet behind, scanning the area with intense focus, his eyes darting around as if searching for something or someone. Claire nodded at the man with the tablet. She didn't say a word to Matt, who stood there, utterly confused. He wanted to ask more questions, but the words caught in his throat. What was going on? Why was this happening? Why was a military helicopter landing on a quiet country road? The tall man with the tablet turned his gaze toward Matt. It wasn't a look of suspicion, but it wasn't friendly either. It was the kind of look you give someone when you're deciding whether or not they need to be dealt with. "Thank you for your assistance," Claire said to Matt, her voice steady and calm. She didn't seem worried at all. "But it's time for you to leave." Matt's brain raced. He wanted to ask what was happening, who these men were, and why a Black Hawk had just landed. But before he could say anything, Claire spoke again. "Forget everything you saw here today. It wasn't a request. It was an order." Matt stood there for a moment, feeling a strange weight in the air. He wanted to question it, to challenge it, but something told him it was better not to. So he turned away, slowly, and walked back to his truck, the sound of the helicopter's engine still echoing in his ears. Matt couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. He climbed into his truck and started the engine, but his hands were shaking slightly. The noise of the helicopter was still in the air, fading away as the massive Black Hawk lifted off the ground and soared into the sky. Matt watched it disappear over the tree line, still trying to make sense of everything that had just happened. He glanced in the rearview mirror at the empty road behind him. Claire was still standing by the side of the SUV, watching him leave. The two men in tactical gear had disappeared into the helicopter before it took off. Matt felt a strange weight in his chest, a sense of unease that wouldn't go away. As he drove away, Matt tried to focus on the road, trying to clear his head, but his mind kept racing, replaying the scene over and over. Who were those people? What was Claire really doing out there? And why had a military helicopter landed in such a quiet, isolated place? The road seemed longer than usual. Matt couldn't stop looking over his shoulder, half expecting the Black Hawk to come back down again. He wondered if he'd imagined the whole thing. Maybe it had been some sort of strange dream or hallucination, but he knew it hadn't been. He had seen it with his own eyes. When Matt reached his house, he parked the truck in the driveway and sat there for a moment. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the yard. Everything seemed normal, yet everything felt off. He didn't want to think about what he'd seen, but it kept creeping into his thoughts. The Black Hawk. The two men in military gear, Claire and her calm, almost robotic way of speaking. He went inside his house and tried to distract himself. He made a simple dinner, sat down at the table, and tried to watch some TV, but nothing could hold his attention. He kept looking at the clock, wondering if he should call someone. Maybe he should tell the police. Maybe they could figure out who those people were, but something inside him stopped him. It was as if some invisible force was telling him to keep quiet, to forget it all. After all, Claire had made it clear, forget everything. The thought bothered him, though. Why did it feel like they were watching him? He didn't think anyone would come after him, but the way the man had looked at him, the coldness in his eyes, made him wonder. Matt sat in the silence of his home, the quiet now almost unbearable. He glanced at the clock again. It was getting late, and the strange events of the day seemed to be slipping further into the past. But the unease remained, gnawing at him. He couldn't help but feel like he had just been part of something much bigger than he understood. And yet, there was no sign of anyone following him. No sign that anyone had noticed he had been there at all. He felt the weight of the day press down on him, but there was nothing he could do to change it. Whatever had happened was over now. He could either let it go or live with the questions. But for some reason, the questions wouldn't let him go. The next few days passed in a blur for Matt. The quiet country road, the helicopter, the strange men, it all felt like it had happened in another life. Every time he tried to focus on his work or his normal routine, his mind would drift back to that moment by the side of the road. He kept wondering who Claire really was and why she had been there. What was in that silver case she had grabbed from the trunk? What kind of people were they? Matt couldn't stop thinking about it, but he also didn't want to think about it. It was one of those things that seemed too big, too dangerous to understand. So he tried to let it go, telling himself that it wasn't his problem. After all, Claire had made it clear, forget everything. But it wasn't that easy. On the fourth day after the incident, Matt checked his mail when he came home from work. He had been expecting the usual bills and junk mail, but there was an envelope, thick and plain. No return address, no markings of any kind. It was just a plain manila envelope. His heart skipped as he stared at it. The strange feeling from that day by the road returned, but this time it felt sharper, more urgent. He hesitated for a moment before opening it. Inside the envelope, he found a letter, folded neatly. He opened it and began to read. "Thank you for your help. You acted without asking questions, and for that, you are appreciated. We understand that the events you witnessed were unusual. We ask that you remain silent and continue with your life as if nothing happened. However, should you choose to speak, know that there will be consequences. Your cooperation is important." There was no signature, no name, just the message, and underneath, a large stack of cash. Matt blinked. There must have been $10,000, all in neat bills. It didn't seem real. For a moment, Matt felt like he was caught in some kind of strange dream. He looked at the money, then back at the letter. His thoughts raced. Was this some sort of payment for his silence? Was this how they did things, by paying people off and threatening them? He set the letter and money down on the kitchen table, his mind spinning. He had been given a choice, hadn't he? Take the money and forget what had happened, or say something and risk whatever consequences they were warning him about. Matt's hand hovered over the money for a moment. He didn't need it, not like this. But the fear that crept into his thoughts told him that the people behind the letter and the helicopter weren't people to take lightly. They had resources, power, and they had made it clear that he was part of something bigger than he could ever have imagined. He wasn't sure what to do. He didn't want to involve anyone else, but he couldn't just pretend everything was fine, either. The weight of the decision sat heavily on him. He couldn't forget, not yet, not after everything that had happened. The next few days passed in a haze. Matt tried to carry on with his normal life, but the letter and the money kept pulling him back into the mystery. He couldn't forget it, no matter how hard he tried. Every time he walked past the table where the envelope had been, he glanced at the stack of cash, still sitting there like a silent reminder of what he had seen. He hadn't touched the money. Part of him felt like if he did, he would be accepting something he didn't fully understand. But another part of him wondered if that was the point, to push him into a decision without giving him a chance to really think it through. Either way, he couldn't seem to stop his mind from racing. Matt's routine was disrupted. Even the simplest tasks seemed harder to focus on. He thought about Claire every day, about the Black Hawk, and about the two men in tactical gear. What had they been doing out there? Why had they needed Claire's help? He tried to push those thoughts away, but it felt like they had taken root in his mind, growing with each passing hour. One evening, Matt decided to take a walk around the neighborhood, trying to clear his head. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the empty streets. The cool breeze helped calm his nerves as he walked, but his thoughts were still on the letter. He'd reached the end of the block and paused at the corner, looking down the street. Just as he turned to head back home, a car pulled up slowly beside him. Matt glanced at the driver, who gave him a nod before the window rolled down. "Matt Grayson?" the man asked, his voice calm but firm. He was wearing dark sunglasses, even though the sun had nearly set. Matt's heart skipped a beat. Something about the man's presence made him uneasy. "Yeah, that's me," Matt replied cautiously, trying to keep his voice steady. "I have a message for you," the man said, reaching into the passenger seat and pulling out a small envelope. The envelope looked very similar to the one Matt had received days earlier. Matt's pulse quickened. The man handed the envelope to Matt, his expression unreadable. "Take this. Don't ask questions. Just read it." Matt stared at the envelope in his hand, feeling the weight of it. He didn't want to open it right there on the street, not with the man watching him. But he didn't have much choice. He tore the envelope open, the paper inside feeling thick and official. It was a short message. "We know you have the money. Keep quiet, or we will act. Do not contact anyone. We are watching." Matt's stomach dropped. The words on the paper were clear, and they weren't a suggestion. They were a warning. He looked up at the man, but the car was already driving away, the engine fading into the distance. Matt stood there, the envelope still in his hand, the weight of the message sinking in. He wanted to tell someone, maybe the police, maybe a friend, but deep down, he knew that wasn't an option. Whoever these people were, they weren't to be taken lightly, and if they were watching him, he didn't know what would happen next. Matt turned back toward his house, his mind spinning. Everything was changing, and he had no idea how to stop it. Matt spent the next few days on edge. The letter and the message from the man in the car were weighing on him. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Every time he left his house, he glanced over his shoulder, expecting to see someone following him. It was as if his every move was being monitored, though he couldn't find any proof of it. Life felt different now. Every little sound, every car that passed by, seemed to hold some hidden meaning. Had someone been in his yard? Was someone in the house across the street watching him? The thought made him uneasy, but he pushed it aside. He didn't want to overthink things, yet the fear kept creeping in, making him more anxious. One evening, Matt decided to take a different route home from work, hoping to clear his head. He drove through unfamiliar streets, away from the quiet roads he usually took. Maybe a change of scenery would help. He drove past small shops, houses with families sitting on porches, and streetlights just beginning to flicker on as the sun sank behind the hills. As he approached a quieter part of town, he noticed a familiar black car parked near the side of the road. His heart skipped. It was the same model as the one the man had driven when he handed Matt the second envelope. Matt slowed the truck as he passed, trying not to make it obvious that he was looking. His eyes narrowed as he tried to see if anyone was inside. The car was empty. A cold shiver ran down his spine. He didn't know why the sight of the car made him feel so uneasy. It was just a car, after all. But in that moment, everything felt connected. His thoughts raced back to the letters, the helicopter, and the strange men in military gear. Were they somehow linked? Were these people still following him? Matt's mind kept returning to the message, "We are watching." It was a simple statement, but it carried so much weight. What did they mean by that? Were they tracking his every move? Or was this all in his head, his imagination running wild because of the strange encounter he'd had with Claire and the helicopter? The more Matt thought about it, the more he became certain that he couldn't live like this anymore. He couldn't keep ignoring what had happened. He needed answers, but the fear of what might happen if he dug deeper kept him from acting. He turned his truck onto another street, his hands gripping the wheel tightly. He needed to talk to someone. Maybe a friend, maybe the police, though he wasn't sure who he could trust anymore. He had no way of knowing who was involved in this, or if anyone would even believe him. The more he thought about it, the more confused he became. Matt finally pulled into his driveway, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He didn't know what to do next. Part of him wanted to forget it all, take the money, and move on with his life. But the other part, the part that couldn't stop asking questions, felt like he was standing on the edge of something bigger than he understood. The feeling of being watched never left him. Matt spent the next morning in a daze. He couldn't concentrate at work, his thoughts constantly drifting back to the strange events of the past few days. The letter, the money, the Black Hawk. It was all too much for him to process. He wanted to forget, to live his life like before, but he couldn't. Something inside him told him that he couldn't just let this go. He had decided that he needed to do something about it. He couldn't keep living in fear of being watched, of not knowing what was happening. He couldn't keep wondering if anyone would show up at his door, or if he was being followed. He had to take action, but the question was, what? He thought about the letter again. Do not contact anyone. Those words kept repeating in his mind. Whoever these people were, they had made it clear they didn't want him to ask questions. But Matt couldn't just ignore the mystery. He needed answers, even if it meant risking whatever consequences they had warned him about. His first thought was to go to the police, but then another thought hit him. What if they were already involved? What if the men in the helicopter were connected to something much bigger? He had no way of knowing who was trustworthy anymore. Then, another idea began to form. Claire, she had been there on that road, calm and collected, as if this was all normal for her. She had known exactly what to do, and she hadn't acted surprised by the helicopter or the men. Maybe she had answers. Maybe she knew more than she was letting on. But how could he reach her? After that day, she had just disappeared. He hadn't seen her since, and he had no way of contacting her. Matt knew he had to find her, but how? He thought about retracing his steps, going back to the same road where he had helped her. Maybe she would be there again, or someone would know where she had gone. It was a long shot, but it was the only lead he had. After work, Matt decided to take the risk. He drove back to the same road, his heart pounding in his chest as he made his way through the familiar streets. As he approached the spot where he had seen Claire's broken-down car, his nerves began to settle a little. Maybe this was a mistake, but he had to know. He had to find out what was going on. The road was quiet, just like last time. No sign of the helicopter, no cars in sight, but something felt different now. It was as if the air itself had changed, heavier somehow. Matt parked his truck on the side of the road and got out, looking around carefully. There was no sign of Claire or anyone else. He stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do next. Should he leave, or should he wait and hope that someone, somehow, would appear? Just as he was about to get back in his truck, a car pulled up slowly behind him. Matt turned around, his heart racing. He didn't know if he was about to face trouble or if he had finally found the answers he was searching for. Matt turned around slowly as the car stopped behind him. The engine idled for a moment, and he tensed. Was this another warning? Had they found him again? He stood still, unsure of what to do next. The car's headlights shone bright, cutting through the growing darkness of the evening. The figure inside remained hidden behind tinted windows. For a second, nothing happened. Then, the driver's side window rolled down, revealing a man in a dark suit. He looked calm, his face unreadable. Matt felt a chill run through him. This was different from the man he had seen in the black car before. This man had an air of authority, something about him that made Matt instinctively take a step back. "Matt Grayson?" the man asked, his voice steady, but there was a sharpness to it. "Yeah," Matt replied, his voice tight. "Who are you?" The man didn't answer directly. Instead, he said, "We need to talk. Get in." Matt hesitated. His heart raced, but a part of him knew that this might be his chance to get answers. This might be the moment when everything he had been wondering about could finally make sense. But another part of him screamed not to get in the car. Who were these people? Were they dangerous? He glanced at the man in the car again. There was something about the way he carried himself, something that told Matt he wasn't dealing with ordinary people. These were not regular strangers on the street. They were the kind of people who made their own rules. The man leaned forward slightly. "It's for your own good. Just get in." Matt didn't have time to think. He knew he couldn't keep walking around in the dark, wondering what was happening. Whatever the man in the car wanted, Matt had to take the chance. He had to find out the truth. With a deep breath, Matt walked around to the passenger side of the car and opened the door. The air around him felt heavy, as if everything around him was holding its breath. He slid into the seat, shutting the door behind him. The man started the car and pulled away from the side of the road. They drove in silence for a few moments, the car's tires humming against the pavement. Matt felt the tension rise in his chest. His mind raced with questions. What was going on? Who were these people? Why had they come after him? Finally, the man spoke again, breaking the silence. "We know what you've been trying to figure out, and we know you've been asking too many questions. It's time to stop." Matt swallowed, feeling a lump form in his throat. "What do you mean?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Who are you? What do you want from me?" The man didn't look at him, keeping his eyes on the road. "You're involved now, whether you want to be or not." Matt's stomach twisted. He had been right to feel like he was caught up in something much bigger than himself. The question was, how deep did this go? And was there any way out? They drove on, the night stretching before them, and Matt realized that he had crossed a line. There was no turning back now.